If you want to make a massive hit game, you need to do, you need to basically do two things. You need to get massive amounts of attention, and you need to convert that attention into action, i.e. sales, at an incredibly high rate, or as high a rate as possible. And I'm going to go over the first of those points, which is how does a game go viral? What is the high level process that a game kind of goes through to go viral? And when I say viral, I mean billions of views, okay? Like an internet takeover type of thing, like Among Us, Minecraft, Fortnite, that kind of thing. My own game, Choo Choo Charles, is estimated. Last time I did an estimate, it was like 5 billion views, but that was about a year ago. It's probably around 6, 7, 8 by now. I don't know. I haven't estimated in a while, but it's thousands of millions. Okay. So usually when you talk about viral marketing, especially for games, people go, that's you just got to get lucky. It's just luck. It's you can't really predict that, but you kind of can predict it, and it is actually pretty reproducible, I think. And if you understand how the algorithms work, how what the thought process is behind YouTubers, streamers, TikTokers, all those kind of folks, then it's pretty straightforward. So I'm just going to explain at a high level generally how it works, how it functions, what the process is. And in future videos, I'll talk about the specific like design checklist of the things that you can do to increase the virality of a video game. Okay, so first thing, where do you need to get attention? Ultimately, if you want to get as much attention as possible, you need to be focusing on YouTube, TikTok, and Twitch. Okay. Obviously, there are there's tons of social media sites. You know, you got your Reddits and your Twitters and your Instagram. There's lots of stuff. And ultimately, you want to be optimized for all of those platforms. And that might sound daunting at first, but I'm going to break down why it's not actually too difficult, because pretty much all these platforms use very, very, very similar algorithms. So every platform, every social media platform makes money by serving advertisements to users, right? That's usually their primary income source. So in order to serve as many ads as possible to as many users, their goal is to keep users on their platform for as long as possible. So in order to do that, they promote content that is keeping people on the platform for as long as possible. So on YouTube, this means they're going to promote videos that have really good click-through rates and really good retention and average view duration. You know, on Twitch, that's going to be probably promoting streamers that just get lots and lots of watch time. Same thing on TikTok. On TikTok, it's mostly just retention based. It's like the more people are watching your videos, like the longer they're watching your videos for, if they're rewatching your videos 3 times over, that is great, and that'll push those videos out further, allowing them to get, you know, millions, tens of millions of views, all that stuff, right? Because those pieces of content are helping keep people on the platform and helping those platforms serve more advertisements and earn more revenue. So I already kind of touched on them, but basically every single social media platform is going to use one or more of the following 3 sort of signifiers in order to promote content. They're going to be using view duration, like the amount of time spent interacting with and engaging with a post. They're going to use interaction rate. So there's going to be things, you know, sites like Reddit that are using like upvotes, or Twitter with retweets and likes and things like that. And then the last one would be a click-through rate, which is mostly just YouTube. There aren't really many other social media platforms that utilize click-through rate in quite the same way that YouTube does, but YouTube is probably the biggest one of any of the platforms that's like really going to push your game. So it's, even if it's the only platform, you need click-through rate. It's really important. Not every platform uses all of these, but if your game fits well and works with all 3 of these different sort of signifiers, these different triggers, then it can pretty much go viral anywhere. What is it that actually causes a game to blow up and go from nobody knowing about it to getting billions of views? So ultimately, you have to understand the perspective of YouTubers and content creators. Every influencer is a business, okay? Start with that assumption. Every YouTuber is a business, and the way that they make money is by getting views, okay? In the influencer world, Views are more or less equivalent to money. More views, more money. Okay? If a YouTuber plays your game on their channel and they see, wow, this game is performing half as well as most of my other content, they're probably not going to play your game again. They're not going to give it any more attention. Also, it sucks that your game got half as much attention as it could have if it was better. But just at a base level, if you want to get as much content out there about your game as possible, it needs to perform well and needs to perform above average as compared to other games that YouTubers and influencers are covering. So they play your game, they get half as many views as normal. Okay, they're never going to play it again. They're not going to recommend their YouTuber friends to play it. And unless your game is like really, really fun, like there are some YouTubers who are like so massive, they're so big that they're not even running it like a business anymore. They don't really care about the money. They're just they're more or less retired. They're just doing their thing. They're having fun. They're going to play the games that they want to play. And if your game happens to be just really fun and they just enjoyed playing it on their channel, then maybe, yeah, they'd cover it some more. But that is an exception, okay? Most YouTubers are running a business. They need the views. They're going to try and get as many views as possible. And if you're not doing it for them, they're going to go elsewhere. That's just how it is. So then what happens if a YouTuber plays your game and it gets twice as many views as their content would usually get? Well, first off, they're going to take note of that. Oh, hey, my audience really likes this game. Now they're going to, if they can make more content about it, if they can make a part 2, part 3, part 4, they'll do that. If they can make a lore explained video, they'll go ahead and do that. Basically, they will keep on making content about the game until there's not really any more content in the game to make videos about. You know, if somebody's playing your game and they're making a bunch of money off of it, right? They're making bank. They're making tens of thousands of dollars more than they would playing whatever other random games are coming out. They're going to tell their friends, right? Okay, YouTubers, in the same way that you've got game developer friends, YouTubers have got YouTuber friends. They say, hey, buddy, you've got a channel that's kind of similar to mine. You've got a similar audience. You should try playing this game because you'll probably make a lot of money. Again, this isn't probably specifically how the conversation goes. Like, hey, bro, want to get bank? But if they're seeing that this content is going over well with their audience, they will be way more likely to recommend it to other people and say, hey, you should try this out. Your audience might like it. As well as that, YouTubers watch YouTube, believe it or not. It's crazy, I know. So if somebody sees somebody else upload a video of a game and they're like, holy crap, that's a lot of views. That's more views than they would normally get. Maybe I should try playing that game on my channel. And all of these things combined lead to a flood of content. Okay? It can turn into a tidal wave very quickly. And that tidal wave will continue to grow and keep going and keep getting bigger and bigger until there's either no more content in your game for people to exploit, right? Like a game like mine, like Choo Choo Charles, there's not that much content in it. You can beat it in a few hours, so maybe you get a couple videos out of that, maybe doing some side missions, maybe you play a couple mods, do a lore explained video, bust a couple myths, and then that's about it. There's not really much more that you can make about it. So then that kind of cuts the tap dry, right? Okay. Or if views on the game decrease, like let's say you've got a game like Fortnite or just like a round based game that you could make content about forever, right? If the views start decreasing and now the views are average or below average and there's, other stuff that they could be doing, then they'll probably stop playing it then. Or if another game comes along that is able to get even more views. Like let's say, you released your game, you're doing pretty good, but then this other game comes out and it is pulling insane views. It's pulling 5 times as many views as these people would normally get. Well, that one's going to take priority. Sorry, you're old news now. So that's like a high level overview of just like generally how this works. Okay. Ultimately you also need to get the ball rolling. Like that's really what this comes down to. It's a ball. You roll it down the hill, and the better formatted your game is, the further and faster it'll roll. But obviously you need a ball to roll down the hill in the first place. So, this is where your general pre-launch marketing comes in, getting wish lists, trying to get on the Steam front page, putting out a demo, sending out keys to YouTubers, right? Trying to get enough attention early on that you can guarantee that you'll get at least, let's say, 5 or 10 large size channels to cover your game. If you can get 5 or 10, moderate, well-sized channels to cover your game, then that's probably enough to generally know if your game was going to roll. Like if it was going to roll, 5 or 10 big channels is enough to know. Like that's enough to get the ball going, right? Because there are, like, for Choo Choo Charles, I crunched some numbers about a year and a half back when I was studying a lot of this stuff, and I saw that on average it performed 2.5 times better than the channel's normal content that was uploaded at the same time period. So I took like the 5 videos that were uploaded before videos about Choo Choo Charles and the 5 videos that were uploaded after videos about Choo Choo Charles, averaged that out, saw where Charles ranked on that, and then ranked it across a bunch of different channels of a bunch of different sizes, and found that it performed about 2.5 times better than most content. But that wasn't the case across the board, right? There were some channels where it was performing 5 times better, and there were some channels where it was performing like 20% lower, or half as well, right? There were some odd case, like edge case scenarios where it was performing worse, but in general, overall, is performing better. So if you've got, one YouTuber that plays your game, it might just happen to be they're recording on kind of an off day. They weren't feeling it. Their editor didn't have time to go through and like make a really good edit, or maybe their thumbnail was bad, or who knows. There could be cases, if you've got a really, really small sample size, where your game doesn't catch on because you just didn't have a large enough ball to push down the hill, right? If you're trying to push a marble down a mountain, it might get stuck on something, right? But if you got a boulder, then you're probably not going to get stopped by anything too small. So yeah, in order to kind of ignite the fire, it really just comes down to that pre-launch marketing, that early press list, things like that, and making sure that you get a handful of people to cover it early on. If you can get that, then the rest of it should fall into place, assuming that you follow. Again, I'm going to make another video in the future talking about like the actual step-by-step, but for now, I just want to lay the foundation and just generally explain how this works. The coolest thing about this is that it really doesn't take that much to make a game that has above average performance, because most people are not designing games with this in mind. If like anybody, pretty much nobody. So basically every game is performing average, or the developers are just kind of shooting blind, and then sometimes they got something that hits. But if you design with this stuff in mind, it's really not that difficult to stand out. One of the things with social media is that tiny, like single percentage changes over time. You make a handful of small optimizations to your game, and that can amount in exponentially greater, numbers of views and way better performance. That's just how social media works. You might have 40% retention with all the other stats the same, and you get 100,000 views, and then you go up to 45% retention and you get 500,000, and you go up to 50% and you get 10 million. That's not a real example, but it scales exponentially with these small incremental adjustments and optimizations. So it doesn't really take that much to get your game set way apart and just make it go absolutely insanely viral. And kind of on the topic of exponential growth here, it's like when it comes to making something viral, you very, very quickly go from 0 to 100. Okay, there is a very like exponential curve as you start getting more and more things put in your favor. If your game, again, like we were talking about, if it's performing half as well as other games, you're not going anywhere. Okay, you're not getting past the start line. All right, let alone anywhere close to the finish. It doesn't matter if you try and pay a bunch of YouTubers to play your game. It doesn't matter if you beg people on Twitter to play it. It doesn't matter what you do. It's not going to go viral because it needs to have that above average performance. It needs to hit that viral threshold. And I don't know exactly what that viral threshold is. About 2.5x seems to be pretty decent at least, because that's about where Choo Choo Charles lined up. There's sort of a fuzzy threshold at which everything just kind of accelerates exponentially. So, yeah, it really just comes down to how you design your game, because you can design it to take better advantage of click-through rates and retention. Okay, so like with click-through rate, for example, if you've got no interesting characters in your game, no characters, no faces, and your lighting is like really dark and the colors are all muted, how do you make a good thumbnail out of that? Okay, if you've got a game that is instead colorful, well lit, well contrasted, and you've got interesting, unique, well branded characters, right? You've got faces. People are drawn to faces. Okay, we're trained to just look for faces in everything. You know, so characters with, that are either humanoid or that have like animalistic characteristics. Animalistic characters are probably even better than humanoid. I possibly just because we see humanoid people everywhere all the time, always. But animalistic characters are a little bit more distinct. If your game takes place in a unique environment, that is a massive plus. With Choo Choo Charles, I kind of failed on that front. It just takes place on an island, like a forested island, which is pretty boring. It doesn't really help imply much. But like with my new game, with Cuff Bust, it's super colorful. It's bright. It's well contrasted. I've got these like humanoid-ish alien koala creatures, right? They've got humanoid characteristics just for familiarity's sake, but then like enough animalistic attributes that they're just cuter, right? And then since it takes place in a prison, it's like if you see any of the prison imagery in a thumbnail, watchtowers, I don't know, cell blocks, cell doors, obviously stuff like the guards and the prisoner outfits, right? That environmental context immediately adds more like implied conflict, right? You can immediately kind of look at a single screenshot and kind of generally get an idea of what the game is about, rather than just seeing a dark screenshot with like a tiny little like flashlight illuminating like a tree in a forest. Like, that's not interesting. This is why like the whole mascot horror subgenre is so much more popular on YouTube than any of these other horror genres. Now keep in mind, it doesn't convert well. Right in the beginning of the video, we were talking about, you need lots of attention and high conversion rates. Mascot horror does not have high conversion rates. Okay, at least the way that most of them are formatted. Choo Choo Charles has pretty decent conversion rates, but it could still be better. And again, that's for another day. But because the characters in these games are colorful, they're well contrasted, they've got faces, there's unique branding, unique environments. There's just a lot of elements that make them work way better than your generic, overly dark, psychological horror game that has just some like shadow monster or something. That's just not that interesting in the context of social media. But mascot horror works exponentially better. For a lot of the early games that were doing it, not quite as much anymore, because now every developer is trying to do mascot horror. It worked really well. It was getting across that viral threshold because every other horror game is just dark and dull and uninteresting. When it comes to retention, I did a big retention study also about a year and a half ago, and I was able to identify it was like over 20 pretty distinct like features and like game mechanics that have very distinct effects on YouTube retention. So again, I'm going to get into all this stuff later on, but just as a foundational base level look at like how the process works, this is it. Simply put, at the end of the day, the way that a game goes ultra viral and gets billions and billions of views is because it's a game that people find more interesting. It's a game that they find more engaging, more interesting, more appealing. It looks more fun. It tells a better story, and it just fits better in a social media context. It's all about making something that is more appealing to a broader audience.